And we are going to basically have a chance for everyone to discuss with the presenters, the delegates to discuss among each other. And as always with these roundtable discussions, the core question is kind of what you think it is, which is essentially, we've spent the day, we've listened to a presentation, we've seen some demos, we've had some questions and answers, we've heard from a partner, and it kind of gets down to the core question of multi-cloud. So I will actually pose that premise to my my esteemed colleagues around the table. Who wants to kick us off here with a thought on modern multi-cloud? What does it mean? And what have you heard today that tells you what it means?
I'll jump in because we had to cut time off from some of the ransomware discussion. And when we discuss multi-cloud, that's probably one of the quickest ways that we move into, I have everything built in one location, I need to restore it into another location. So when we were talking about ransomware and the solutions that you have around cloud datasets, where are y'all looking at that type of recovery, ransomware detection, and solutioning?
Yeah, I'll take that. So number one, acknowledge it's not only a multi-cloud, but a multi-layer approach. Depends on where the threat is and where the layer of technology is. Nathan, you brought up Cloud DataSense, which is a great example because it's one of the NetApp offerings that's not just restricted to NetApp storage or NetApp environments. Cloud DataSense has the ability to view, scan, give insights, alerts, and reporting on lots of types of storage. Be it our traditional storage competitors, you might have an Isilon platform out there, an HP platform, or you might be one of the cloud formats that's not just a standard NFS SMB like OneDrive, SharePoint, or some of the object buckets. So Cloud DataSense, to do its job well, we had to give it the capability to look at a lot of different types of stuff. Now, what we also have to acknowledge is I can look at a lot of places, bring a lot of value, and I encourage everybody, go to netapp.com or cloud.netapp.com and look at some of the dashboards that you can see, where you can see red and green light alerts on different environments where there may be issues and what it comes out. I'm sorry we didn't get to that today. Maybe the next cloud failure, maybe Stephen will let us do another one and we'll get into that. But as you go deeper, you can see an alert on from them, but to take action, especially the autonomous action, sometimes we have to go deeper. As an example, if it's an on-tap environment and we're seeing anomalous behavior like excessive serial encryption on a volume, right? That's not normal. And so the AI engine will see that and say, that's not normal, and have some steps it can take. Like it can spin an immutable snapshot at that moment in time, so that if even you don't see it and get involved for an hour, that's your worst fallback. You may go up to the next level of user activity. So another layer of the technology stack is the cloud secure capability of Cloud Insights that can say, okay, a snapshot was given, but how about, what if it's not on just this particular file system? What if it's a user account on a lot of different, a really smart hacker that's going in different places? It'll identify that anomalous behavior and not only flag that, kick off the snapshot if it hasn't been, but block that user. So there's different layers you got to go to. And so we're kind of looking at it as a multi-cloud horizontal segment, and then striped this way, what is the layer of technology? And we'll bring value as high up the stack as we can.
I think the other thing to your specific scenario, I think if you've had a ransom attack and you're recovering, you're not going to be able to practically recover any significant amount of data to another cloud if it's not there already, right? Bandwidth, data gravity, not to mention ingress and egress charges and all the other things that make that impractical. So your only solutions there are to either point in time restore to the cloud you're on, making the assumption that the challenge that got you attacked in the first place is likely not something wrong with the cloud architecture, right? That's likely to be a black swan event versus a more standard spear phishing or any other sort of more common compromise, right? So most likely, like Chuck was saying, the ability to have those point-in-time snapshots that are already there, that are consistent across all the different clouds, right, and all managed within that sort of software, lets you recover to that point in time instantaneously. Anything that's not snapshot-based recovery for the data sizes we're talking about and the speed in which files can be encrypted, especially with hardware offload of encryption and everything like that, you're never getting it back if you're trying to stream it as a backup. The other solution is if you truly do want to have it as a cross-cloud sort of occurrence for ransomware or for let's say some massive denial of service attack or something like that, then it's having the data already there, right? So that's where the cross-cloud capabilities that Chuck and the team demonstrated to be able to literally drag and drop and have your data in 2 different places on 2 different clouds. It's like a mega availability zone, let's call it, or something like that, right? I made a term up. Yeah, MAZ, is that a thing now?
Hey, that's gonna be over Twitter now.
That, darn it. Did I trademark that? Wait, no, it's a NetApp work product. Darn it.
Think of an E because that would really be appropriate.
Yeah,
Because then it would be maze.
Maze. Multi-availability zone encryption. There we go. Yeah,
I think
made a
it's a
product.
good point that we have the challenge of the technology being able to prevent or like see and then ultimately prevent. And there's that weird trust of like, at what point will there actually be real application behavior that will emulate a heuristic that represents what looks like ransomware? And the idea, then there's work, I was actually at SNEA last week, SDC, talking about other storage, services that are aiming to do the moment they see, as you said, sort of serial encryption beginning, that immediately it makes the files immutable. Yep. And so it self-detects, prevents, but there are genuine cases where there are things we're doing where, we could be using different architectures. Key value stores behave fundamentally differently in how they write and reallocate data on the fly, which can, by some good heuristic measurement, appear like it's doing naughty things. And then you've got this weird thing of, what's right? And all of a sudden, thousands of things get deleted all at once. You're like, oh God. Oh no, it's actually because I'm just cleaning up my M drive, right? Or whatever. Like there are tough things of user behavior that's normal or application behavior that's normal. And normal is such a hard thing to ascertain now.
And it varies by workload, right? There's EDA workloads or M&E workloads that involve, by definition, making 1 million files and then deleting them a couple minutes later, right?
Yep.
Not to mention AI workloads and everything like that. So if you apply the same heuristics engine without the right intelligence behind it and say, once you discovered this to be the signature of an attack, just applied equally across all your volumes, you're going to denial of service your own storage, essentially, right? By making all your files immutable, and then someone will be mad.
Well, to that same thread, so as we talk about security and stuff like that, I've loved what I've been hearing about the cloud managed capability, but I do have a certain level of concern about, like, we're now taking the storage layer that historically has been hidden behind multiple layers of things that block it from the big wide world, and now we're giving some manageability and observability to the outside world. What kind of controls do we have aside from just basic RBAC to prevent access, to control access to that cloud managed endpoint and things like that for our organizations? So MFA, ACLs, things like that. I mean, what are we talking
I'm going to add on that governance.
Yes.
Right. Like overall overreaching governance from all the things that you mentioned, but also like data sovereignty, data residency, all that. Like, what are we doing about that?
So specifically on the hyperscaler, say if you take AWS, there are keys. You take Google Cloud, there are service accounts. So we tap into what the clouds are doing in that perspective and just utilizing it for our own products within the hyperscaler.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that. It's like, many of the conversations we have are around security and security policies and knowing who has access in the cloud sense. It's who has access to which resources, and it could be down to the individual resource, bucket name or it's a single EC2 instance or what have you. And so our policies are obviously, because they do utilize, say, AWS IAM, it's not, it's open. It's something that you can go in there and you know what our policy is asking your systems to do, whether it's provisioning or deleting or building a new one. And that's part of the, the transparency that the Google team mentioned as well, is you need to know what it's going to do. So it's aligning with them and then also using it as much as possible. But from I
was just going to say as well, you were asking about Cloud Manager specifically, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Cloud Manager, you can configure federation so that it federates over to your own organization and then have MFA associated with that as well. Like every time we sign in, we have to approve a key or, hit it on Authenticator to be able to get in. So that's another line of defense that you were kind of looking for there as well.
So I'd like to extend it out, right? Because this is all talking about building the storage piece of it, right? So what happens when, the goal is to provide developers their playground to build an application or a service out to the rest of it. So how is, so if I'm a developer and I'm consuming storage to display as part of a application, is that on them to keep that locked down to the right degree, or is that on the storage side to keep that locked down?
I mean, I could just start off with like, I got a mic, yeah. Thank you. I mean, everything starts off with a good cloud architecture, right, for your organization. And so, we have customers that have, thought they were going to start small, and then, they built sort of a very simplistic sort of architecture in terms of how the networking and their design of folders and projects and how we sort of lay that all out was relatively straightforward. And then they realized, oh, wait, I now have 300 teams in my organization. All of them are accessing different data resources. They all have sort of they want staging areas and production areas. Some of them are on-prem and they want to access data. And they, it gets really complicated. The point being is then they actually rewrite the entire cloud architecture in terms of the networking design, the project folder layout, the access control mechanisms and that. Then once they have that, then all of a sudden that's when, NetApp would come into play and just saying, okay, well now we're deploying into that architecture, and then how do we make use of how they've set up the roles and the service accounts and the access control and everything else.
Somebody like from our side, the ops side, is trying to understand the best practices. Where would they look to get templates for that? Would we look to our very familiar on-prem storage providers, or would we look to y'all for that kind of
Like who's the guy? Who's the guiding reference?
Yeah,
Yeah.
From a governance standpoint, because governance and security are they're two separate functions, but they are related.
I would take responsibility into us in the sense that, as said, every cloud has their own sort of reference architectures in terms of how you build secure systems and deployments. And so I would say you'd want to probably start with the specific clouds, white papers and best practices guides that we have on our website, and work with our team, right, in terms of deploying that out for the organization. And then it's really about how do we complement all of that, right, with the storage services that
Right.
yeah.
It is. I find that shared architecture. I mean, a lot of the white papers and on Google Docs, docs.google cloud, are co-authored by NetApp, because we know that we have to fit into that ecosystem as well of however you've decided to architect your solution. So the reference architectures, we provide input into that, or help author them. And so that's where I would definitely start in the cloud provider. What Cloud Manager then does, or what the services then do, is give you that consistent experience. If you do happen to have that in other cloud providers, you know that there's going to be a way to achieve your high security or your compliance requirements, or your role-based access, because that's the NetApp promise in a sense of our products, that we will be able to deliver that capability to you.
In the end, all you got to do is just phone the Uber engineer, ask them their password, and apparently just give it away, and you take over the whole thing. All this stuff doesn't mean anything.
Jeez, man. You're so positive till then.
I will say to your original question, I think this is one of the interesting things we struggled with. If you go back 15 years ago and you set up a storage array, right, you put the management port on a separate subnet and you called it a day, right? And it was a little bit of, I don't want to call it security by obscurity, but it was close to an air gap, right? But not really. And I think that we all struggled with the first day you could actually manage a storage array, but do it from the cloud, right? It was a brand new paradigm, right? For us or anyone else, and this isn't NetApp specific, I think this would be true for any of our competitors or cooperators in the industry, right? And in some ways, I even myself, I'll freely admit it, at first kind of was resistant to the idea as someone who's been around for a while. And it's like, whoa. But then you realize, I mean, the principles of zero trust and everything, you should assume that your management network is on the public internet, right? I mean, it's the assumptions of zero trust is that your data center is already compromised, right? And at any time it is compromised. And so the good thing about putting something on the public internet is it means you have to focus on the things that are truly important, right? Multiple admin verification, all of the structures that Google Cloud and others have put in place, because you can't just rely upon someone can't route to that IP address as a method of security, because that's not a true method of security anymore. So by removing that as a crutch, to be quite honest, and it's a really helpful crutch because it makes us all feel like we can fall asleep at night, right? That there's a firewall and it's a separate subnet and everything. It's not a valid crutch anymore. And so we've got to adopt more secure and more sophisticated methods for this age.
You actually bring up the perfect thing of assume it's compromised, and now what do you do? It's not necessarily about detection, pre-detection, and Pumla, to your thing about governance. This is something that came up. We talked about datasets before, and Chuck, yes, you brought up the thing of like, let's find a file owner, and it's connected to Active Directory. And the first thing that hits me is like, okay, it's metadata storage, but is it then maintained in an immutable state somewhere as a point over time? Because, you know, Pumla and I say something naughty at our company and we get fired. And all of a sudden our Active Directory is removed. And so is that metadata, that the stuff that we touched right before we got fired, oh yeah, we did something naughty to the file system as well as, you know, just what got us knocked out of the company.
I'm always naughty, okay?
Is there, like, because that itself has to be maintained for an incredibly long period of time, because we don't know when it occurs. By the time ransomware started 2 years ago, really bad things happened today, but it was there a long time ago. And that's part of the problem, is having this sort of immutable, continuous record as a time series that you could go back and say like, a series of events occurred that I can go back and have this in this true sort of immutable reference to then go back and record that the thing that happened today actually began 6 months ago.
Well, not just ransomware, but what about litigation, lawsuits? They happen. People leave companies, and next thing there's a lawsuit over, you know, whatever situation. You've got to go back and dig up that data. Like,
I'd say that's one of the advantages that NetApp has is having thought about this for a really, really long time, that people do keep data for a very long time. And so when it comes to moving that data into the cloud or having it in a different, you know, suddenly we're starting to run different kinds of applications, we're still thinking about that. And that is still one of the things that, yes, we know that people are going to want to keep data around for 10 years, 25 years, the lifespan of a patient or whatever it happens to be. And that should be something that the data management system should be able to tell you. So I think that's one of the core tenets for us, is that your data requirements don't change, whether you want to run it in Google, you want to run it on premises. And the tools should be there, whether they are autonomous in the system itself, like what Chuck mentioned, where it's automatically taking a snapshot if it detects something that might be ransomware, to the more kind of, okay, I'm going to set a policy, and this policy is going to tell me when things are going to be kept, through to DataSense, which is literally saying, what is that data? Where is it? So I think of it as almost a layer cake. I like food analogies. So a layer cake or pancake stack of data considerations that we have thought about through the years, and now we're bringing that across the board wherever you go.
Even as simple as the odd thing that happened, personally experienced this, right, where we had a full audit that was done. I worked in a large financial services firm. Just go over my LinkedIn, you'll figure out who they are. But you know, we got regular audits, as we should. Proudly survived them all. But one thing came in, they said, hey, let's check, is this user here? And this user was let go. Normal, like they were summer students. And then you go and you check Active Directory, and like, they weren't deleted, they're right here. And then we realized, like, oh, because they were hired back the next summer.
Right.
And so in that case where we had a file that was owned by somebody, and then, you know, it was deleted or something, like an activity occurred triggered by a user behavior, and then we mark that and we say like, all right, good, immutable log, a record of that thing occurring, and then that user gets let go, and then you hire somebody that's their exactly the same first initial last name.
it happens.
Like, what are the records? Is it a UUID? Are there other things? Anyways, there's questions that you shouldn't have to answer to some idiot nerd like me on a panel right now, but things to think about as we look about
Two
that.
things I wanted to say on that whole discussion. One is that, Lisa, can we please have DoorDash bring Phoebe Egg McMuffin, because she's obviously still hungry. Second is that one of the things that we're trying to do here is with our Cloud Volumes platform, because you bring up retention and things, remember, this is the customer's data. We're not becoming the data warehouse.
Right.
There is so much data that's available, but it's your file systems and your data and how long you choose to keep all of it. It's your data, it's your logs, your metadata is in your file systems. The problem is that it's been out there for years. If you go back to 1995, you could keep data for 10 years. You just couldn't figure out anything about it. You know, you have an employee that left. He said, I did this. You could never prove it. So what we're trying to do is give the intelligence to be able to mine that data and make it available to you. If you have that lawsuit, you need to be able to show what did and didn't happen. But I just want to draw that distinction that we're not keeping Cloud Manager is not keeping metadata about your data at all.
Right.
You have it.
But you're
We're giving you a
classifying,
SaaS
you're
service.
helping classify it.
We're classifying your data by tagging your data with the tags you wanted, but that's your data and your metadata. It's not in our account. So
But we can search
that's-
for it if we need to. If
You-
we
if
need to
you
find
keep
all
it, you
1,000
can
cat
search for it.
pictures of yours.
There you
But you know what? If I in my account, I say, look, I don't want to keep anything more than 6 months. Nothing. Deleting all file systems, all objects, all this, all that. And 3 years later, somebody brings a lawsuit against me. I can't go to NetApp to say, I need to know what happened 2 years ago. Those logs are gone because that was my data. You know what I mean? And so that's the shared, and I think it was somebody, shared responsibility.
Correct.
Zero trust, shared responsibility, intelligence to allow you to do everything you need to in that model.
We in IT apps call that not my circus, not my monkeys.
So I want to touch on when we're discussing compliance, we're discussing governance. There's something that is kind of like, I don't know where it is. I always think of it as a step down from governance, but it's called standardization. And we always think of it in terms of like data, metadata tags, which you just brought up. What solutions in terms of like self-service and not self-service, self-healing and automation tools can NetApp bring to the table in terms of I have a gold, bronze, and whatever's between gold and bronze, silver tiering, and I've got a workload that's not bronze, it should be gold. Is there some sort of like self-healing there? I have a Kubernetes cluster that has different speeds. You know, this one pod is supposed to be on this one solution. Is those type of self-healing? And then one last use case, which is PII, which you showed, which was perfect, but PII is really great when it's where it's supposed to be, and it's not always where it's supposed to be. So are these things that y'all are investigating, or are these things that you already have available?
Some of them, I can't say that we can solve all the problems in the world, but as an example, some of the SLA and
could say that.
I could say that, but I would get sorry, Baxter's keeping an eye on me. So first of all, in terms of some of the things that we showed here in terms of provisioning infrastructure for the type of job, we showed you some very basic, but there are higher levels where I can create templates that say based upon this user in this role doing this type of job, here's the kind of infrastructure, which gets you part of the way there. You actually saw a little bit of that with the SAP HANA implementation. That can be templatized and automated so that if I'm doing an SAP HANA workload, it's always going to be the right level of storage, in this case, with the right level of throughput. Happens a lot. You mentioned Kubernetes. Happens a lot because, as we talked about, it's incredibly dynamic. You have I read about a month ago, 2 months ago, I read that the average lifespan of a node in a cluster is measured in seconds. Literally, it was like 87 seconds or something. It was crazy to me. They didn't even refer to it as minutes because it was fractional. This stuff comes and goes, and it's up and down. So making sure that you can have the right class of resource applied at the time, that's part of the automation process that we help with. And in addition to that, when you're looking at the monitoring, things like our observability capabilities provided by the Cloud Insights engine says I can have performance levels set. I can monitor thousands of things. I can have my dashboards set up that if something is not performing according to its SLA levels, it's flagged for me. And even more than that, the ML can learn as to what the likely steps are to take. It doesn't yet autonomously do things like, for example, if I have a number of processes running on a single node in a Kubernetes environment, and one of them starts to hog all the resource, start to write a whole bunch of files. Because sometimes these things are small amounts of storage. I had 10 gig assigned for these 5 because it comes and goes. It's ephemeral, shouldn't be. But all of a sudden, one of them is furiously writing and creating data, and CI says the other 4, soon I'm going to be out of storage space, and you're going to get an out of space condition sent to you. It will say these other 4, they're about to be compromised. You may want to do X, Y, and Z. You may want to spin up another VM, move this over, move the offender over, and provision more storage, for example. So we're getting there in terms of A, automate and templatize the provision of resources. B, monitor what's going on with the SLAs you set. We can't do it. So the user of the system has to set those. Monitor all these thousands of different points for storage performance, IO throughput, network performance, compute performance, application and database performance, and let you know when you're crossing the red line. And if it does, provide you with, here's the next 3 things that we recommend you do. That's where we are today. I can't wait till next year when we have this same session and see.
It'd be neat to see that ability to sort of stream that data for persistence somewhere else. And I think that's where more largely enterprises are getting to, where they ultimately, whether it's just, pouring it in and treating a Kafka subscription so they can capture stuff for their own stuff, but it's keeping it in some sort of time series database, as you mentioned. Not your circus, not your monkeys, my circus. So I could now, in using an ability to stream that data instead of wait for it to write, commit, pull it, like FTP it, SFTP it around the old school way, right? Team hardware. So, but I want to go now to this data is being streamed somewhere. Can I stream it now to a central repository and then do other exciting things like fire Google ML services at it and really see what's going on so that I can better operate my environment?
I think it goes full circle to where we very started at the very beginning of the day, which was that it's not just collecting the data about the storage that you care about, because okay, my storage is busy, so what? Maybe that's a good thing, but it's what is my workflow, what is my application trying to achieve? And that's where we want to get to as a holistic, with our partners at Google, with all the tools that we have at our availability, but also giving them to you. And then that might end up in a different system depending on who you are and where you happen to be. So I think we have one more question.
At the beginning of the day, you said that multi-cloud initiatives have historically been happening by accident. M&As, whatever like that, somebody accidentally swiping a credit card. Yeah. And that now people are deliberately architecting for multi-cloud. How many, without saying anything, what customers are deliberately creating multi-hyperscaler environments, and what's that use case look like?
Do you guys want to take this? Do you have?
I'm one of them.
I can't, but I
Say anyone like
okay.
Yeah.
Give the link to the mic.
I am a customer.
Okay.
I will not say my employer, but we are deliberately building a multi-cloud enablement program so that we can bring in officially additional cloud services that are outside of our current existing cloud platform so that it's governed in an enterprise way. Because like you said, it was, I don't say it's accidental, but it was, things just came about, right? So you got to pull stuff together, and building a program like that is very, very complex because you have to upskill your existing engineers that know hybrid, that know on-premises, but also the other cloud provider. But now they're faced with, oh, wait, we have all these additional clouds that are now official. What's going to happen with us? Are you hiring new people? It's been a fun and rough 6-7 months for me personally, challenging. And we're looking at it from a phase perspective. Initially, let's get these additional clouds up and running with all those foundational components, landing zones, bring them up first so they have all that governance, take lessons learned from the other side, bring it over, less technical debt, let's learn from our lessons from past mistakes so don't repeat it in the new clouds. And then let's build a new target operating model.
But is that the why behind? So I'm
The why is cloud crazy, right? Cloud sprawl.
Why is cloud crazy?
Yeah, like it became madness. Well, not madness, but cloud sprawl. There's services out there that were getting deployed.
But that's still speaking to the first point of it, of the accident.
Yeah,
that's not speaking to
most of it is
deliberate.
accidental, right?
One of the other things is we live in a world of mergers and acquisitions.
Sure.
So two companies merged.
Yep.
One would have one cloud strategy. The other would have one other cloud strategy.
Right.
NetApp is kind of the link between the two. We cater to this cloud, we cater to that cloud, and make sure that.
But that's still the accident. That's not the.
You guys are all talking about the accident, right?
I will say one more thing. I get the last word. So I do think that, okay, there's the choice to say I have different business units. They want to do different things, different applications, different clouds. But I also think that and there's obviously, I want to balance my risk. I think these are use cases that are valid, and they have, they're not necessarily something technical that they say, hey, I'm going to architect this. But I think there's that really there's wanting to use the right tool at the right time for the right job. And that may change. So it's not to say that I'm multi-cloud because I am all in one cloud provider and then I'm going to start using another one and move everything there and maybe I'm half. It's because things change over time and that may just make more sense. I don't think that's accidental. I think that's an intentional decision to say, I want to put it where it makes the most
That
sense.
makes sense. I get that.
It's a little bit of accidental and it's a little bit of adapting to your business needs. As your business grows, your business needs changes, so you are adapting. 6, 7 years ago, this was the need. But now that scope has changed and the business is actually evolving faster than IT. And it usually is. IT is usually the last to jump on the train because we're a little bit fearful of things. But it's businesses evolving to what the business wants to do to be competitive, to get, to basically make money. It's our paycheck.
The other thing is what if you're in the middle of, and I think the way y'all started off was perfect. We're talking about these workflows, right? So we're talking about these work pipelines, which that's all developer CI/CD talk until now that we're actually able to deploy everything as code to help them in the cloud, right? So maybe what the business needed at the time that they conceived the application and someone's on their laptop building it out in a particular cloud made sense to be on that cloud, but the services they need to scale it and deploy it globally and to make all the money off of it aren't available on the cloud they developed it on. But because IT now has become smart enough to understand what services are where, they can advise them, okay, we really need to go here, and here's the way we're going to get there, and this is how we're going to get there. There's some of that is kind of typical. The same things happened on-prem. Yay, I have a whole bunch of servers. If we put some VMs on this, we probably can do this faster for you and get more performance for it. And that happened in the middle. Always put the train tracks out in front of the train. But it sounds like you're trying to get ahead of doing that part, the train tracks.
A little bit of both.
Get ahead of the train. I like that.
Yeah, we're running along with the train.
Running with the train.
Trying to catch with it. No, it's a little bit of everything. It really is, because it's trying to get ahead, trying to wrangle everything back together so we're all not doing whatever. But then it's also like our business partners. They're evolving too. So we have to evolve with our business partners. It's a very complex question.